Welcome to the program now, the great Jay Bhattacharya. He's the director of the National Institutes of Health, former interim CDC director. The guy has done it all, and he was right about COVID, quite famously, which is why the Biden administration spent so much time trying to censor him. As always, Jay, great to have you back on the show, sir. Thank you.
Nice to be back, Vince.
Okay, let me start with what I was just talking about. This data that shows that the COVID jab in the first trimester apparently had devastating effects on unborn children, and yet this data somehow it was entirely kept from us. And Anthony Fauci and all these other people, they knew about it. They were talking amongst themselves about it, but they refused to acknowledge it to the public. What do you make of this?
I think it was irresponsible of them. Just full stop. I think that when you have a new product like that COVID vaccine I think there were those texts for January 2021.
Yes.
And you're a official who has worked very hard to get those products on the market. Even if you aren't, you're a top sort of public health person who's everyone's advice you're looking to for advice. You have an obligation to share your honest thoughts about potential harms to people that might take the thing. And instead, what they did is they were reflecting the scientific debate that was happening at the time around the COVID vaccine for kids and for pregnant women privately. But publicly, they exuded a confidence that they did not deserve to have regarding its safety for those populations. For me, when I was looking at it back then, I was thinking, COVID is a really damaging disease for older people, really, high rates of death. And the balance for me, made sense for older people that, if you can prevent death, maybe there's some side effects, but they might be worth it to prevent death from COVID for old people. And for young people and for pregnant women, we should have been far more careful. In fact, I articulated that and got all kinds of grief for it in 2021. But then it went beyond that, Vince. They also went all in on mandates. They pushed very hard that every single person should be vaccinated with a COVID vaccine irresponsibly, when we now know privately they harbored doubts regarding the safety of those products, or at least the balance of risks and harms for those products for pregnant women and potentially even for children. It was just irresponsible of them not to reflect that in their public utterance.
Well, and I would say not just irresponsible, but downright tyrannical. I mean, if you are having a real, robust scientific debate amongst yourselves, but not acknowledging to the public on which you are imposing all of these impositions, like COVID jabs and losing jobs and destroying lives and killing unborn children, I mean, this is tyrannical behavior, and it worries me that this was considered kind of normal inside of the government, that people are like, that you would have a debate like this, but then not acknowledge it to the people who are supposed to be in charge, which is the voting public.
Vince, it was even worse. The Biden administration, what they did is they systematically went out into social media and to advertisers of shows like yours, and they would say, if you amplify these doubts, we're going to censor you. We're going to destroy your company. Right, so I was banned. I was shadow banned in Twitter. Basically blacklisted on Twitter. The day I joined, I believe, based on the pressure of the Biden administration, going to the old Twitter before Elon, saying, look, if you don't shadow ban these ideas, not me specifically, but these ideas, we're going to destroy you as a company. The Biden administration went to Facebook and literally forced them to suppress private messaging groups regarding vaccine injury to the COVID vaccine.
Yes.
Again, with threatening their company if they didn't comply. That kind of censorship, I can't even imagine what was going through their heads. So they must have thought that they were so morally justified in pushing the COVID vaccine for everybody that it was worth violating the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And Vince, if we'd had the First Amendment, the public could have seen that robust scientific debate you're talking about. The result would have been so much different, so much better, I think, because I think when we allow the public to see how we scientists are arguing with each other, that gives a more honest reflection of what the reality is than I am the top guru of all science and you must listen to me.
How deeply embedded, when you arrived at NIH, how deeply embedded was this worldview, would you say? That this idea that, like, hey, we are the science and the public better listen to us. What have you found and what have you had to deal with?
That's been the heartbreaking thing, because I don't believe most scientists are like that, Vince. Most scientists want an honest conversation about the data. I mean, we go into science because we don't know the answers to all the questions. We discover the answers in the context of learning from looking at data, arguing with other scientists about how to interpret it, asking for new experiments. That process is what brings people into science to begin with. And that the vast majority of people at NIH are like that. They want that. It was the leadership of some parts of the NIH that embraced this sort of almost authoritarian view of what science should be, this top-down, I am the science and I know best and therefore you should listen to me, that is actually antithetical to science. Most people at the NIH are not like that, Vince. And to me, that's been one of the, I mean, I already knew that to some extent because I have so many good colleagues in the NIH before I became director of it. It's a really great place that has resulted in so countless advances that have benefited the lives of millions and basically billions of people,
So,
and it will continue to do that. But
so was the staff horrified by the leadership then? In other words, like you said, there's a lot of good people there. You say,
it's
so
like
were
a
the
Stockholm
people?
syndrome.
Go
It's
ahead.
like I mean, it's like a Stockholm syndrome. Like what you have is um, people who they understand what the leadership is asking of them, and so it's hard to speak up in that context, right? You could get fired, your career as a scientist could be over. I mean, the former head of the NIH actually wrote an email to Tony Fauci calling for a devastating takedown of me, my colleagues from Harvard and Oxford at the time when we argued against lockdowns. Under that kind of abusive leadership, you're going to get people who just clam up, silent, when in fact they have scientific doubts. I think that's the problem. Is not, it was, to my mind, it was that leadership that took on this sort of uh, godlike capacity to make decisions for millions of other people rather than letting the scientific process play out. Most scientists want the scientific process to play out
Yeah.
because that's how we learn. That's how we get to truth.
So speaking of the scientific process, I saw that recently the Trump administration has banished this very dangerous gain of function research, the federal funding for gain of function research, in order to make viruses more deadly and infectious to humans. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but there's never been a time that we've truly established that this gain of function research has resulted in a net benefit for humanity. It's always been like crazy lab leaks and peril and death. And at some point, you're like, well, let's stop doing that. It's actually the definition of insanity for us to keep doing this. So the Trump administration is ending this. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so I've helped with this process, and now we have a policy that will make sure that we don't ever fund this dangerous kind of work again. Um, there's in 2010 or 2011, there was a big debate going on in the scientific community whether we should be allowing scientists to make viruses more dangerous. The argument in favor, which was favored by Tony Fauci and Francis Collins, then the former head of the NIH, said that, look, the knowledge we gain from this will be worth it, even if there's a risk of lab leak. In fact, there were an op-ed in the Washington Post with that literal sentence, or very, very close to that sentence, in it. And the argument was that we could predict which virus is going to make the leap, and then we can develop vaccines and countermeasures in advance. I agree with you. There's no evidence that there's a single bit of human benefit that has come from this research. It's just the analogy I'd give is to the beginning of the nuclear age. Enrico Fermi, brilliant physicist, launched the nuclear age in 1942 with by doing an experiment where he started the first nuclear chain reaction on a squash court in the University of Chicago. He's a brilliant mathematician and physicist. He was worried that if he started this nuclear chain reaction, maybe he couldn't stop it. It would like set fire to the world. And so he did a calculation. What is the probability of a catastrophic explosion coming out of this nuclear reaction he started? And he calculated a probability of 0, and then he did the experiment. Under the new Trump regulation, what happens is every scientist that's going to do a biological experiment is going to be required to do that calculation. Are you taking a risk that will risk the well-being of the entire world? Can you cancel a pandemic with what you're doing? And if that risk is more than 0, we will not fund that research.
That's a big deal. Thank you for doing that. Long overdue, for sure. And by the way, wasn't Anthony Fauci's involvement in funding gain of function in Wuhan? Wasn't he like using some sort of like creative definition for gain of function in order to justify how he was getting away with this?
Yeah, so you can see this in the exchange that Tony Fauci has with Rand Paul in some of those famous Senate hearings.
Yes.
What the game that Tony Fauci is playing is that he and others had worked on a regulatory process to say, look, if you're working on a list of dangerous, one of these viruses from a list of dangerous viruses, Ebola or something
Yep.
like that, and you're making them more dangerous, then you are doing dangerous gain of function. You're doing gain of function. But what if you're working on a virus that comes out of a bat cave in China no one's ever heard of, that's not on any list, and you make that one more dangerous? Well, that's not dangerous gain of function because it's not on the list. The new idea of how we regulate this is we ask you to assess, we ask the scientists and we ask the institutions where they work to assess the risk of the experiment causing catastrophic
Okay.
harm, whether it
Okay.
comes from a list or not. That is something that scientists who are working in this area are fully capable of doing. And there's going to be an independent body that will oversee it and look and say, well, look, you got that calculation wrong. There actually is a risk. We're not going to allow you to fund
Right.
it.
So it doesn't matter what you call it. It's about how much is this a risk to humanity.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's a
Got
very
it.
different way of thinking about it. And Tony Fauci was using this loophole to fund research on in dangerous areas that he shouldn't have funded, frankly. And I think that if we'd had this new regulation in place
Yes.
back then, that research would never have been funded.
Jay Bhattacharya, this weekend you were on CBS with Margaret Brennan, where I was not surprised by her treatment of you. It was also ridiculous, but she was basically, as I understood it from watching the interview, accusing you and the Trump administration of somehow being responsible for a shooter taking aim at the CDC last year. She's saying that he was guided by vaccine misinformation. Uh, can you take us inside that interview? What was that like sitting there as you're listening to like you're being accused of murder, and meanwhile you're thinking to yourself, wait a second, misinformation? That's what you've been doing.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not really good at hostile exchanges, so I mean, there's some sense of like frustration I had because I thought I just wanted an honest conversation with her,
Right.
and what she did was exactly what you said, right? There was a very tragic event that happened in the CDC about a year ago, where a crazy man decided to start shooting up the CDC, and he. I don't really know that it's productive to get in the heads of a crazy man. He said things about the vaccines. I have no idea what motivated him to go shoot people. He went into the child care center of the CDC to scope out the place the day before he went and shoot
Oh,
it.
in other
Um,
words, there's no justification for murder, which is the kind of the point.
Yeah, and there was a heroic cop named David Rose, Officer David Rose, who gave his life protecting the people of the CDC. And
Hmm.
so when I became the interim director of the CDC, acting director of the CDC, I ordered that the street that leads into the CDC be named after this officer. And that day was supposed to be a celebration of his life. So my last day at the CDC, and I was celebrating his life and his sacrifice. We invited his family to come down. I talked with David Rose's mom. I called his wife a few months before. I mean, it was a somber day because we were celebrating the sacrifice of a heroic man. It should have been about that. To accuse Bobby or me or the president of spreading misinformation and causing the shooting it's frankly unhinged. So I wasn't sure how to I wasn't sure how to manage that in the moment. I think the issue is that and you nailed it. A lot of the misinformation that was put out regarding the COVID vaccinations, the lockdowns, the school closures, natural immunity, all of that was promulgated by the government. And the Biden administration leaned into that by suppressing any discussion that dissented from the dogmatic opinions that they had.
Well,
And for whatever
sure.
reason, Margaret Brennan wouldn't acknowledge that fact. I
Yes.
mean, it was just a reality. And somehow, like, CBS is supposed to promote, sort of say what, at the very least, let the public debate happen. She seemed to
Yep.
be taking a particular side on it, and frankly, an unhinged side.
Right, sure. And it wasn't just the Biden administration, it was their handmaidens in the media that were carrying water on behalf of the Biden administration. So that's how you end up with people taking ivermectin as a try and handle this, and then being accused of of using horse dewormer like they're psychopaths. And that was the media who was doing that water carrying. So it's no
Yeah.
wonder that the public is absolutely staggered by the number of lies that are coming out of the Biden administration and the media, which is supposed to be scrutinizing the Biden people.
Vince, the thing is, there's a philosophy here which I entirely oppose, which is that in order to get people to do what you want, what you do is you control what they see and say. That's the philosophy that I think Margaret Brennan has. My philosophy, and this is how we led the NIH, is in the CDC, is let there be public discussion about when there's controversies. Let the people have their say. Science moves slowly. If you give it an environment where it can grow, that kind of debate is very, very productive. With the NIH now, I mean, I put a policy in of academic freedom where people are allowed to have those kind of conversations. Do I know the answers to all these questions? The answer is no, I don't. I mean, I'm
Right.
not an expert in every area, and just because I believe it as the head of the NIH, therefore it's true. That's
Yes.
ridiculous, Vince. And in the new NIH, we don't do that. Right? We allow the debate, and we encourage researchers to focus on the most important problems so that the work of the NIH can actually improve your health and health of millions of others. It's a very different kind of philosophy, and you saw that play out in that little clip with Margaret Brennan I had. You saw that play out all through the pandemic. This idea that you must control the information from above, and if you control it, good things will happen. I reject that philosophy entirely.
Finally, in terms of placing trust back in the hands of the American people, you had a big announcement yesterday in the Oval Office about the vaccine schedule, saying that parents are not compelled to inject their children with 1,000 things at once. Can you tell us what the decision was yesterday and what led to that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. So one is the primary thing that led to that is the passion that the president and Bobby and others in the administration have that we need to get answers to parents who have autistic kids. Like you see this large rise in autism. Why is that? We don't know the full answer to that. At the NIH, what we've done is we've sponsored science to actually give permission to science to ask that question. A lot of scientists are fearful to even ask those questions because what if they get the wrong answer and then they get canceled or some devastating takedown happens? We've churned the page on that. Last year, we started the Autism Data Science Initiative, funded 12 major teams to ask, and it's a complex biological question. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I don't know the answer to it, why autism has risen, but I want the answer, and I want scientists to do their honest thing to try to figure out the answer. And
Yeah.
that's what we've been working at the NIH. So that was the first part of it. The second part of it, again, philosophically, the letters you can look at itself. The second part of it is what you emphasized and was right, which is this, that parents should be able to play a real role in decision making about the health of their kids. You shouldn't feel compelled to say, okay, you must take if you have worries about the sequencing of how your kids are vaccinated or whatever, you should have some autonomy. And there's a philosophy there. You know, the president has very strong feelings about breaking up the MMR vaccine into three, or sequencing so that you sequence out the vaccines in different rates. Different parents have different ideas about this, and many times parents feel like they're compelled to. You must do it this way, or you're a bad parent.
Yes.
Right. What this EO does, and it's a real important moment in public health. It says, look, that's the wrong way of doing things. We in public health, we in science should be working alongside you as parents, giving you the best advice that we have, best evidence we have, and treat you with respect. And so you can make good decisions for your kids. You know, in Europe, they don't mandate childhood vaccines for the most part. A couple of countries do, but most of them don't. And yet their rates of uptake for the basic childhood vaccinations is higher than it is in the United States.
Yeah. So two quick things, if I have your time. I appreciate you being here. The hepatitis B vaccine is always the one that stands out to parents. They're like, why do I need to vaccinate my child against hepatitis B? It's a sexually transmitted disease or something that you get through needle usage. It doesn't even make any sense. And yet babies are being forced to get this. I think that's always been one of the standouts where it's like, well, wait a second, why am I doing this? Does that strike you as real?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I feel like let's imagine a policy where you test the mom for hepatitis B. She's negative. She
Yeah.
has no high risk behaviors. You can wait. I mean, I personally got the hepatitis B vaccine when I first started med school. That's when I started, you know, because I get needle sticks potentially. So it's a risk,
Yes.
right? So that made sense for me to wait. I think the idea of one size fits all for every single vaccine I mean, I think that's the philosophy that the president's fighting against. And I agree with the president on this. Like, I think we should be treating people with
Yes.
respect, communicating clearly what the risks are, and then giving the best scientific evidence there is when you're making recommendations.
And then finally, what about pediatricians? Because like realistically, like you're right, parents should be given the choice to be able to make these decisions for their kids ultimately. But a lot of parents, which makes sense, they trust their pediatrician on this. The pediatrician is going to be like, hey, you should do this. This is good for the kid. What about that relationship? Are pediatricians under some sort of immense pressure to jab these kids 1,000 times, or are they going to be liberated to use actual science now?
Well, I mean, I think, I generally, as a general matter, I have a lot of respect for doctors, and especially the doctor-patient relationship I view as sacred. And so, a good doctor won't let that happen, right? They'll give you their honest idea. What we've seen in the last few years is that we've seen pressure from groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics on pediatricians to toe the party line, if you will. And it's just really counterproductive. Like the emphasis from these groups should be to empower physicians to walk alongside their patients and help them make good decisions, instead of saying we must do this. In California, there was a law that Governor Newsom signed called AB 2098 that actually said to doctors, if you step outside this party line, you can lose your license. Right, that fortunately was overturned by the courts. But that kind of philosophy essentially destroys the doctor-patient relationships, put doctors and patients in a very difficult place, because doctors then have to say, if I violate the party line, am I going to lose my license? And patients are going to say, do I trust my doctor? Are they acting on my behalf or on someone else's behalf? It's a very bad place to be. I think with this new EO, I mean, it's going to take time, but we've started to turn the page toward I hope, a more healthy relationship between patients and doctors.
Well, thank you for restoring science. The Director of National Institutes of Health, Jay Bhattacharya, thank you for your time this morning, sir.
Thank you, Ben. It's always good to talk.
All right, there's Jay Bhattacharya.